Good day, class. I want to welcome you to another class on environmental extension. This is lecture 2 on environmental degradation. I want to welcome you to this class. Today we'll be considering man-induced environmental degradation. Man-induced environmental degradation. My name is Professor Oluwatosin Fashion. By way of introduction, we have considered the root causes of environmental degradation in our last lecture. They include poverty, ignorance, population pressure, advancement in technology, the emergence of free market economies, poor attitude of people towards the environment. This particular lecture will be considering specific activities of human beings that contribute to environmental degradation. It is important to know that agricultural activities, if not done with an environmental conservation consciousness or sustainability, can lead to degradation. And this is where we come in as agricultural extension officers. We know that majority of our people are involved in agriculture and agricultural related activities as a major source of income. That's a major income generating activities. And so they need to undertake these activities in a proper way that will not bring about any form of detrimental effects on the environment. Now, these are a list of man's activities that causes environmental degradation. One of them is agricultural activities, which we are mentioning, which is very, very germane. We have fishing, you have mining and quarrying. Can you see them here? This is mining and quarry. Then we have dredging. You have urban development, which include the building of houses, factories, roads, improper disposal of waste. These are various activities of man that causes environmental degradation. And today we'll be considering agricultural activities in particular. Now, how does agriculture cause environmental degradation? One is as a result of poor farming practices. Land clearance, for example, when it is clean cut or when it is deforested, is a poor farming practice. Clean cutting or removing all the grass, packing them together and even burning them. Bush burning is a very poor, a very bad farming practice. No matter how easy it is and how it will help the farmer to have a clear land for cultivation, it is very bad in that it kills soil macro and microorganisms. Earthworms are examples of macroorganisms in the soil, ones that you can see with your eyes. When you burn the farm after clearing, you kill off all the earthworms who need a cool, wet environment to operate. And you know the earthworms, they help in burrowing into the soil, bringing about proper aeration, proper percolation of water into the soil, and then they also refine the soil to make it much more easier for our plant roots to be able to penetrate. But when they are killed off through bush burning, then these activities will not be done. Then you also find the fact that bush burning also destroy organic matter, which all the plant materials are all to decay and then add back nitrogen to the soil. They are burnt off. Another poor farming practice is overcropping of the same land. When the same land is used more and more often for cropping activities without any form of replenishment, the land depletes in soil nutrients and leads to shorter fallow periods. When there's overcropping, then the land does not have opportunity to replenish or to recover back itself. It's like when you have a woman that is giving birth almost every year. You know what can happen to that kind of woman? She is going to be frail. So therefore, the same thing happens to the soil. When you overcrop it, you don't give it time to rest and to recover the lost nutrients naturally, or even if naturally you add some artificial materials to improve it, definitely there will be depletion of some nutrients, and then there will be problem of productivity. Farming on sloping soil or sloping grounds or lands is also another poor farming practice. When a land is slopy, there's a way you farm on it, but there are some level of slopiness that you just need to do what? Plant grasses or plant forests, so that trees, to ensure that the land is not degraded. But when people begin to farm on slopy, steep graded lands without consideration for erosion, then there's going to be problem of environmental degradation. Then you also have inappropriate irrigation, when too much water is applied to a particular environment, not considering the soil capacity for retention of water or in the soil type. Then it brings about swampy or low water lodged lands in the farming system. Then you also have increase in field size due to economies of scale. And when the farm size are increased, because we want to take advantage of the large scale economies of scale, then you reduce shelter for wildlife, and this brings about destruction of biodiversity too in the environment. So these are ways that poor farming practices causes environmental degradation. Furthermore, the exposure of the naked soil after harvesting by heavy equipment is another problem. When heavy equipments are used, like the tractor that we see over here, when they are used on the soil, it exposes the soil to water, wind, erosion, and then all these earthworms and other plants, other organisms in the soil, they tend to be killed off and disappear due to this heavy equipment. Then monoculture. Monoculture, as good as it is, that helps in mechanization, destabilizes the local ecosystem, because in the ecosystem there's no place where it is only one type of plant that is growing. It's a mixture. It's like a mixed farming. But when you have monoculture, you are destabilizing the environment, you are removing all other plants and retaining a particular plant. So if it's a bottom feeder, then the crops, the nutrients on the top layer of the soil will be left there. If it's a top feeder, then the ones that ought to go down will not be able to go down and get those the nutrients. And then you have this problem over the years. It is the same crop that is planted, then a particular level of the land is famished of nutrients, and other aspects of the soil or sublayers or whatever are still having nutrients. Then because of monoculture, you use chemicals, agrochemicals to kill off weeds and things like that, you destroy the ecosystem, the natural ecosystem, and you are not doing anything to bring that kind of system back in your own way. So these are things that makes agriculture to cause environmental degradation. Now, continuous use of fertilizer also is another issue. Fertilizer is good, but you see, when fertilizer is not used properly, if it's used over a long time, it makes the soil acidic, because all the chemicals that are used to make use of inorganic fertilizer, they are acidic. They are usually acidic. NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, urea, all those things, they are acidic, and it destroys soil microorganisms. It destroys the soil structure. It also causes eutrophication, that is excessive growth of algae in water bodies, will lead to depletion of oxygen for aquatic animals. So you see how what happens on the land is also affecting the water bodies. And then it also causes ozone layer depletion. We are going to look at how this causes ozone layer depletion. You also look at it also causes heavy metals and other harmful chemicals to remain in crops. These are residues in crops grown on fertilizer. When you eat crops grown with fertilizer, there are still some residues of the fertilizer, the chemicals that are used to make fertilizer, that are retained in those crops that we consume as human beings. So you need to take note of that. Soil contamination also is another problem. when this water, these chemicals are used to fertilize the soil, when there's a runoff, for example, when the farmers use much more than they're supposed to use, thinking that it's going to give them a better yield, or when they use some combinations they're not supposed to combine together, then what do you find? You find that there's a runoff. It enters into the water system, it pollutes the water system, and there's a phenomenon called the blue baby syndrome. And this is when the level of oxygen in the blood of infants is decreased because of the kind of water that they are taking, and which causes skin color to change to blue green. This condition can also lead to coma and even death. So these are various ways that agriculture, our practices in agriculture, causes environmental degradation. It destroys the soil. By the time the soil is destroyed, it also affects the water. By the time the water is destroyed, what about the air? All those things, they are linked together. And so therefore we need to monitor what we do in agriculture, and that's why we are studying a course like this, environmental extension. Other health hazards are linked with the contact or consumption of fertilizer infected air, water, or food, which include goiter, hypertension, respiratory ailments, heart disease, etc. Now, interestingly, nitrogen contamination from fertilizers has also been established as a crucial trigger for certain cancers, such as gastric cancer, testicular cancer, and stomach cancer. People now are being brought down, being destroyed, and some die as a result of cancer. And it is increasing. And we wonder, why is cancer increasing? And in most cases, it's as a result of the food that we eat, what we consume. Because that is a major area where we get something into our body system. Then the air we breathe, the water we drink. They are important areas where our body gets its nourishment, and which can bring about diseases also. So the use of fertilizer is noted to be taken in moderation, whether they are organic or inorganic. You see, we should allow the soil to replenish itself through bush fallow, crop rotation, and other things like that. So investments in soil and water conservation is very, very important. So we can also talk about mulching, shade trees, etc. Now, what other activities in agriculture makes the environment to become degraded? We have livestock production. When our nomadic herders in the savanna and shire regions, they are forced to graze their herds on fragile grassland, and sometimes they even overgraze. For example, you can see what these animals are grazing here. Can you see the grass is very small, very short. You can see also this place, they have grazed this place, that they are trampling upon this place, and the trampling of these animals make the soil to be fragmented or grinded, becoming silt, which makes it prone to erosion. So when these lands are overgrazed, it becomes difficult for the land to recover its potential to support grasses and other vegetation. So as the vegetation is also being removed or reduced, the wind also winnows out a small amount of seed that remains in the soil, then reducing the ability of the soil to retain moisture, so that when rain falls, it washes off the soil, because the soil has become silt like powder, and it makes it not be able to absorb water. Just like pour water on powder, you find that it will not be able to enter into that powder unless you begin to do some mixing. The same thing happens with the soil. When the soil has been silted, when the soil has been grinded through animal activities, what happens is that the soil becomes silty and then becomes impermeable to water or to retain moisture, and then there's no probability of erosion taking place on the soil. Now, another activity that we involve in agriculture in most cases is deforestation. We deforest, we remove tree cover to give room for agricultural activities, and that's why we have forested areas, forest reserves, where agricultural activities are allowed without the cutting down of trees. So if you want to plant or want to do any form of agricultural activity in the reserve area, you take permission, but you cannot fell down, you cannot fell any tree. And so there's prohibition of felling of trees, and that is to help the environment or to stay together, and so that it does not get degraded. But in most cases, where is not government reserve, you find deforestation taking place, just to give room for large expanse of land for agricultural activities. We can see on the left side of your screen, you can see the deforested land. You can see also burning. After the clearing, there's also going to be burning. All these things affect the environment. Now, when the forest cover is removed, it gives room for soil, for wind and rain to batter the soil, because there's no more protection. So it removes the protection for the soil, and in the process, many soils become eroded, and then it can turn to not just erosion but to gullies. Then we have found out that erosion can cause yield reductions of between 30 to 90% in some root restricted shallow lands of West Africa. Then we also know that forests are large areas of land with trees that are noticeable in areas such as the sub-equatorial and monsoon types of climates, and their importance cannot be overemphasized, especially for us as human beings. You see, they act as sanctuary for rare and endangered animals. They also act as storm breaks, thereby protecting the towns and villages from destruction. They also provide useful products such as wood and charcoal for fuel, fiber for paper and textiles, medicine from the bark and leaves of some plants, breeding ground for animals. They also check erosion and supply food and materials for building houses. But when they are removed, all the benefits that we receive from them, they are gone, and then the area of erosion becomes very, very prominent, in that the soil is left without a cover. Now, just imagine yourself without a roof in a house and rain is falling. You can know the effect of what the rain will do to you. It will not only beat you down very well and give you cold at the end of the day, it will also destroy all the properties you have in that house. If there is no roof over your head, you will be inside the house, but without a roof, what is it? And that's what the forest does for us. Now, desertification is also a serious problem, and is an offshoot of deforestation. When the forests are removed, then the desert encroaches. This takes place especially in the northern area where they are close to the desert. Wherever there is no break for wind, but there's nothing to hinder or restrict the wind, it's going to come in with the desert. The desert begins to advance, and we find out that an estimated of 319 million hectares of Africa are vulnerable to desertification due to sand movement. The Sahara is moving. It has moved into Zamfara and is moving grounded into Nigeria, the northern part of Nigeria. Is because of deforestation, and that's why government and other agencies are taking up the issue of afforestation to ensure that this movement of the sand or the desert is restricted. Now, we want to talk about the greenhouse gases, because agriculture contributes to greenhouse gases, and greenhouse gases, by description and definition, are gases that trap some of the Earth's outgoing energy, thus retaining heat in the atmosphere. If you have seen a greenhouse before, there's one in front of SAT Annex, where we have your lecture rooms. There's a greenhouse there, and that particular greenhouse, what it does is to ensure a kind of environment that excludes whatever is going on in the natural sphere. It tries to preserve the microclimate in that place, and in the process, animals the plants there will release carbon dioxide and other gases. But because of the greenhouse coverage, because of either the tarpaulin or the screen over that particular house, it does not allow the gases to escape, and so therefore it stays within the atmosphere and when it builds up, it traps the heat that's supposed to go out. The sun also beats into the, is released infrared rays, solar radiation enters into that house. But because of the gases that are being built up are not giving opportunity to escape, what happens? The atmosphere heats up, and that's what we call the greenhouse effect. So it also happens in the atmosphere, Earth atmosphere. Now I want you to see the Earth atmosphere. The Earth atmosphere has some layers. We have the ozone layer between the atmosphere, the one we see where we have the clouds, and then the upper area where most times the planes that we travel in, where that's the layer where they travel. And between the stratosphere and the troposphere is the ozone layer. That ozone layer is very, very important. Okay. Now, quickly back to what we were talking about. So, when these gases are released, it traps heat and heats up the atmosphere, and then it does not allow infrared. It also prevents the gases that are supposed to go out. It prevents them from going out. Now we have 5 major greenhouse gases. We have the carbon dioxide, that's the CO2, which is the highest among all the greenhouse gases. We have the methane, we have the nitrous oxide, we have water vapor, we have the ozone too, and then we have certain synthetic chemicals which are called chlorofluorocarbons. These are the 5 major greenhouse gases that we can find, the major ones that can find in our environment. But agriculture contributes to the first 3 majorly: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Now, agriculture itself is both agricultural activities is both a source that generates greenhouse gases and also a sink that also removes greenhouse gases. A source is a net contribution to the atmosphere, while a sink is also a net withdrawal of greenhouse gases. And most agricultural emissions originate from soil management, enteric fermentation, that's inside the digestive system of the ruminants, and then you have energy use, and then manure management. Then conversely, agriculture also helps to slow climate change by storing carbon on agricultural lands, storing or sequestering carbon in soil as organic matter, in perennial vegetation, and in trees, reduces the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, thus making the environment also more conducive. But agriculture at the same time also generates carbon dioxide. I will show you an example of this is a particular model showing how agriculture generates nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and methane. If we look at number 1, 2, 3, there's 1, you have 2, you have 3. These are where nitrogen is fixed by the lightning, it comes into the earth. Then we have nitrogen-based fertilizers applied to pasture, it also enters. Then you have nitrogen taken up by pasture, crops, and trees. So nitrogen is removed. The nitrogen oxide is released through polarization of urea fertilizer. That one is released back into the atmosphere. Nitrogen oxide is released through process of gentrification. That one also is taken back into the atmosphere. Then you also have nitrogen loss through runoff and leaching from fertilizers and nitrification process in the soil. It enters into the water system. It is also taken up by the plants again, and then it goes into the atmosphere. What about carbon dioxide? The various ways that carbon dioxide is released: through plant decay and microbial activity, is released through burning of fossil fuels. When you burn fuels, then it's also released by animals and plants through respiration, release carbon dioxide. Then how does carbon get removed from the atmosphere? It's absorbed by trees and pasture and crops through photosynthesis. Then the animals also consume the carbon by eating the plants. Then carbon from organic residues, EGT, is absorbed into the soil. and that forms organic the organic matter. Now, how is methane? How is it released into the atmosphere? It's produced within the rumen of ruminants and during digestion and via a chemical reaction between carbon and hydrogen. So that's CH4. It goes into the atmosphere. Then methane is also released by cows and sheep during excretion, burping following ruminant digestion. And then small amounts of methane are released from fermentation of animal dung and urine under anaerobic conditions. We also have the release of methane in rice production. Paddy rice production generates a lot of greenhouse gases. So we see that greenhouse gases have a lot of effect in warming up the environment, and that is what we call climate. We also call something global warming, climate change, which we are still going to talk about. All these things are things that happen as a result of agricultural activities. Not only, but agriculture is one of the major contributors to greenhouse gases and other activities that causes global warming and climate change. This is another diagram that shows us how the methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide are produced, and then how they are also absorbed into the atmosphere or from the atmosphere. There's a particular website here. I would like you to go through this website and then look at some information about the different greenhouse gas production, and even how these greenhouse gases or carbon dioxide production, they are measured. You need to find out how they are measured. Okay. We talk of ozone layer. The ozone layer, as I've told you earlier on, is a layer that protects the sun, the earth, from harmful ultraviolet rays of the sun. It does not allow the rays of the sun, to the harmful ultraviolet rays of the sun, to enter into the earth atmosphere, or that's into the troposphere where we live. And because of this, we are protected from something like skin cancer and cataract. You find out that those who have problem with melanin in their skin, the albinos, when the sun is too hot, you find a lot of problem that save their skin bones and things like that. The same thing applies. Those of us that have melanin in our skin, that we are dark in complexion, the melanin helps us to preserve our skin from all these kind of cancerous activities. But when the ozone layer is removed, we are more exposed to these ultraviolet rays of the sun, and this causes problem for us of skin cancer and cataract. So it's very, very important that we maintain the ozone layer. But how does the ozone layer get depleted? For example, we have been told that there's a hole in the ozone layer because of some chemicals being released into the atmosphere by man, causing the generation of the ozone layer. We have some chemicals which we call fluorocarbons that are man-made, that are released through some materials that we use as human beings. For example, aerosols. When you use sprays, for example, you use your mosquito spray, you use your even perfumes, other things like that, and then you have refrigeration equipment, foam, and all these products of certain industrial processes. They release these chemicals into the atmosphere, which break down the ozone molecules that form the ozone layer. You can read more about the ozone layer and what has been happening with the ozone layer. But all these things, the ozone layer will allow those ultraviolet rays to come into the earth's surface, affects us as human beings, and affects the plants and the animals that we also consume. So these are mass effects of these are agricultural based wise, but we know that there are some chemicals that may be used in agriculture that could also contain these chlorofluorocarbons, and which may affect the ozone layer. Okay. Well, these are visible effects of environmental degradation. We have gullies, we have sand dunes. Gullies are more advanced activities of soil erosion. Uh, these gullies are very prominent in the southeast. We have sand dunes. These are prominent in the north, in the northwest, in Zamfara area, and the northern part of Nigeria. Then you also have the flooding. Flooding now is almost everywhere. We have this soil erosion. This is still mild. The one on top is more advanced. Then you have oil spillage in the south, the Niger Delta area of Nigeria. So these are visible effects of environmental degradation, and most of these are caused by human beings, and that's why we need to take note, and especially agriculture, because we need to eat. As we said earlier on, ignorance and the fact that people they are poor, it makes them to begin to use environment, land, or soils that are not too good, or and they use it in a way that will bring about degradation of the environment. So we as environmental extensionists must take this into our mind when we are related to our farmers, and in getting recommendations to farmers on how to use the soil, how to take care of the environment, so that we don't shoot ourselves in the leg in the process of earning or wanting to earn a living. And as I said earlier on, that farmers or rural dwellers, most of the time, they are both the architects and the main victim of environmental degradation. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again the next lecture.